Articles run cover for Jagmeet's threat of a fight in the House of Commons. So I'll show you the CTV article talking about Jagmeet Singh and Polyev calling each other out in the House of Commons and so on and so forth, and how big a deal it is. And the headline doesn't mention Singh at all, but it seems like Singh is the person who was the aggressor in the whole situation. So that's interesting. And we have to start with CTV, I think it's CTV, editing a clip in a creative way to make it seem like Pierre Poilievre is calling for an election over the Liberals giving dental care or whatever, which isn't really dental care, but that's a different story altogether. They made this clip, they edited the leader of the opposition to make him say something he didn't say. And isn't misinformation and disinformation the biggest, baddest thing, right up there with whatever hate speech is, however you define hate, right? Whoever's defining hate. And so I guess CTV can engage in hate speech and do a nonsense apology in the mid-afternoon to get away with it. But if you or me, like if I created a video that made it seem like Pierre Poilievre had said something that he didn't say, right? I mean, at this point in time, people would be calling for my head. That's election interference, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's very strange that our mainstream media can engage in that with complete and utter impunity, right? It's wild. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start. We're going to be talking about free speech. We're going to be starting with exactly what I said, the CTV creatively editing their piece to imply that Poilievre said something that he didn't say. But the consequences of the removal of free speech are something we should talk about, and it's not new. This is very old. If you can't name the problem, then you can't fix the problem. If you say, if you have an orange cup and you're like, the problem is the orange cup, but you can't say it, you can't solve that problem. You're just sitting there looking accusingly at the orange cup, right? Like, got to get that thing out of here, but you can't say anything about it. All that happens is you lose your ability to solve problems. And that's been, well, a hallmark of tyrannical dictatorships for a very long time, I think. Ryan says, George Washington said, quote, if the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. New Jersey wants totalitarian speech in medicine. Under this, Fauci, Mandy Cohen, Francis Collins, Walensky would lose their licenses as well. How about professional discussion and debate instead of Orwellian language laws? And so Craig is highlighting New Jersey Bill A 1884 is George Orwell's 1984. New Jersey is trying to muzzle physicians under penalty of law, which would harm both physicians and patients. And in Ontario, physicians are silenced under penalty of losing your license and your whole business and everything that you're using to pay back your student debts and live your life, et cetera, right? So they will destroy your life in Ontario if you speak out. And in New Jersey, they want to make it they want to be able to directly muzzle physicians. And that's crazy, right? That's absolutely wild. Here, Kyle says, who knew democracy meant silencing your critics? James Lindsay says, Lenin knew this. He made it the basis of his program in black and white. And so censorship, yesterday I said really clearly that without censorship, they lose. I showed very recently a video where people were responding to a bell and they were onboarded slowly. They had 3 actors standing and sitting on the bell, and then they'd bring one person at a time to onboard everybody, and they tried to fill up all the chairs, and they removed people who didn't do what was expected of the group, right? And so the secret of the whole thing is, if they can't censor, if they can't remove that poison pill in the group, then that poison pill creates a situation where they cannot get compliance from the public. They just can't. It's impossible. Unless they can come and remove somebody from influencing the people around them, then their plans won't work. The whole plan, cornerstone, depends on censorship. Okay? So if they succeed with their censorship, expect things to get bad quickly. If I go off the air, I mean, like, not for me, for you, respond as if things are getting bad, right? And worse. Because I don't talk about anything really crazy. I talk about, honestly, the things that I put together, I think are obvious. I just talk about them as if they're obvious. So I don't think that I'm talking about anything controversial, right? Really, not really. And when I joke about people and make fun of people, I'm doing it in good fun, potato-headed Justin Trudeau, right? Here is how seriously the powers that be want to take misinformation and hate speech. Just to give you a little primer of what's going on with CTV News. National News posted this last night in a report on this broadcast. We presented a comment by the opposition, or the official opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, that was taken out of context. It left viewers with the impression that the Conservative non-confidence motion was to defeat the Liberals' dental care program. In fact, the Conservatives have made it clear the motion is based on a long list of issues with the Liberal government, including the carbon tax. A misunderstanding during the editing process resulted in this misrepresentation. We unreservedly apologize to Mr. Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada. We regret this report went to air in the manner that it did. No, they don't. No, they don't. But that's what they're engaging in. And what they did is they maliciously edited a video to purposely misrepresent what Mr. Poilievre said, and in so doing, misled their viewers. And that's supposed to be the worst possible thing you can do, right? It's supposed to be the absolute worst. I had the video side by side of Poilievre, what he said, and then what they edited. I'll get that while we're listening to this. This is how seriously they want us to take misinformation. You just saw CTV engage in misinformation, and I'll show you even more. But here's how seriously they want people to take this. Note her pin, right? That's an SDG Agenda 2030 pin. The people who are wearing this pin are signifying their allegiance, just like they're putting flashing hand signals up. They're signifying their allegiance with the communist plan of unwinding our current Western society in favor of communist dictatorship worldwide. That's what the plan is. That's what they're trying to achieve. Here we go.
Disinformation and hate speech have always existed, but as you so well described, I have never been in a situation of having to try to communicate in an environment that is so toxic and is actively working against the forces for good. So we had no choice, but as the UN, but to start to take action through communications. We can shape the debate, we can educate, we can deliver facts. That is my responsibility as head of communications at the UN, to inform the world about the state of the world, about the statistics of human suffering, the data around climate change, how many people are dying in wars.
Dying in wars. Later in the show, we're going to look at how many people are dying after the COVID injections, okay? So, like, dying in wars, she's really worried about dying in wars. I'm going to fast forward to about here, and then we'll listen to the rest.
Or hate speech. So in short, and hopefully we'll have more time to talk about it, but we introduced global principles, UN global principles on information integrity, which we believe is a blueprint for how to arrive at a healthy information ecosystem. It's very aligned with what you're calling for. It's safety by design, transparency. Let's elevate trusted information and design algorithms that are not going to harm us, but be there for the greater good.
You can't be there for the greater good. What is hate speech? What is misinformation and disinformation? If you have an algorithm sorting information and not letting you see certain things for the greater good, for your safety, comrade, what is that algorithm hiding? You have to make a mess. You have to know what's in the closet. If you don't know what's in the closet, then it can become very, very bad, right? Like, it can turn into, and I mean, like, you could put an unflushed toilet in there, you know what I mean? Or an overflowing toilet in there, or whatever you want. There could be a terrible thing that's going to eventually turn terrible, and you should not close the door to that. And what they're proposing is this ideal that doesn't exist, that can't possibly exist unless you're existing in somebody's walled garden and they have full control of you. And no thanks. Sebastian says, today's CTV News was caught splicing a clip of Pierre Poilievre to propagate the liberal narrative. This is not only a total fabrication designed to deceive Canadians, but also a major breach of journalistic ethics. CTV must apologize for their flagrant use of disinformation. Here's the side-by-side. I knew I had it. I was going left and right, and I just had to go down. Here is what Poilievre said.
That's why it's time to put forward a motion for a carbon tax election.
Okay, so that's what Poilievre said. And then what CTV aired. This is what CTV aired.
That's why we need to put forward a motion. That's why we need to put forward a motion.
I don't know how that implies the dental care thing. Maybe they talked about the dental care thing after, but they're editing clips proactively in order to change the messaging of the opposition leader. That's bad. Melissa Lantsman is responding to this whole thing. CTV gets caught pumping disinformation to protect the prime minister who subsidized them. Here, I fixed it for you guys. A misunderstanding during the editing process made us splice 3 sentences together to say something that Pierre didn't say because we were subsidized by the Liberal government. No wonder Canadians have lost trust in media. Yep. Mr. Surveillance has, people are saying, did they actually air an apology or anything like that? This was at 2:40 in the afternoon, and here is the apology they aired. Here we go. I'll just rewind it. Sorry. Here we go.
Last night, in a report on this broadcast, we presented a comment by the official opposition leader Pierre Poilievre that was taken out of context. It left viewers with the impression the Conservative non-confidence motion was to defeat the Liberals' dental care program. In fact, the Conservatives have made it clear the motion is based on a long list of issues with the Liberal government, including the carbon tax. A misunderstanding during the editing process resulted in this misrepresentation. We unreservedly apologize to Mr. Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada. We regret this report went to air in the manner it did.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. That's why they're putting the apology, burying it in the mid-afternoon, right? We're real sorry about all that. How many people saw it? How many people saw the retraction and apology? Exactly. Andrew Scheer's responding to this whole thing too. He says, when you cut and splice parts of separate sentences to fabricate an entirely made up one, that's not taking it out of context. That's deliberately broadcasting something that never happened. So what people are saying and criticizing CTV News for is that they took this and did what Mr. Scheer is saying. They took 3 different sentences and spliced it together. It wasn't an accidental edit. They did it on purpose. It was malicious. They're apologizing for a misunderstanding during the editing process resulted in this misrepresentation. How does that happen? And when you don't take ownership for your malicious misinformation and your malicious editing, and instead you attribute it to a misunderstanding, oh, shucks darn, then nobody's learned anything. They're not actually apologizing for what they did. They're excusing their bad behavior through a bullshit excuse, right? Will anybody be held accountable for their actions? Probably not. I would be shocked. I would be shocked. Ryan O'Connor says, mainstream Canadian media, independent journalists can't be trusted as they lack proper editorial controls and publish misinformation. Also, mainstream Canadian media, we apologize for undermining trust by lacking proper editorial controls and publishing misinformation. Right. Right. Except they're not even really taking responsibility for what they did. Michael Geist says, whether it's a misunderstanding or misinformation, misses the point. The government's massive financial and regulatory support to Canadian news media has deeply undermined public trust in media's independence, with every error now viewed through this lens. I said it's undermined the media itself from reporting the truth. Public trust is gone because they continue to lie with impunity. Accountability and removal of government funds are necessary, and if they don't do that, they'll cease to exist. Period. It's not like, oh, the media is trying their best and now everybody's viewing their lies through the lens of they might be liars. It's people understand that they're liars because they keep damn well lying, obviously and really, really provably. And when confronted with a lie, they say, oh, real sorry about that. It was a misunderstanding. Shucks, right? People don't trust them because they don't deserve to be trusted because they're lying snakes. Like, that's it. Period. It has nothing to do with perception at this point in time. They just keep, it's like you pick up a snake and it bites you and you're like, oh man, I should have known that it was a snake and it was going to bite me. So the next time you're kind of cautious, right? But this is like, oh, wow, you should just keep picking up the snake and letting it bite you and pay no attention to that, right? Oh, the perception that it's biting you is very bad. Yeah, it keeps biting me. I'm not going to trust that snake. In fact, I might just cut its head off, right? Stop funding it with our tax dollars. Same thing. Brian Lilly's responding as well. He says, this is the kind of thing that kills credibility. Yeah, lying about it and then not taking ownership for the lies. Yeah, that kills your credibility. Pretty good. Every journalist should know that conservative voters already hold them in suspicion, and rightly so. Don't give them more reasons to doubt you. Their job is to do what the Liberal government wants. And more conservatives are not going to read CTV News because they don't trust CTV News anyway, so they're trying to play to their base. They're not going to admit a mistake. They don't care about their credibility. They care about the top line, the bottom line, whatever line it is where the money is listed, and that's what they care about. The money that they're getting, the power and influence that they're wielding on behalf of the government as the propagandist arm of the Liberal government at this point in time. Sue-Ann says, why would the United Nations invite a prime minister who is tanking in the polls, whose government has one scandal after another, and whose country is broken, to give an address at the UN General Assembly? Well, they needed him there. They needed him there to pass this whole, what's it called? The Pact for the Future, Summit of the Future thing. So J.K. London says, the people didn't vote for this. How can traders like Martin and company just sign us up for this? Surely it's unconstitutional. I'm still not sure if this is something that is past, or if they're still studying it. It seems like it's past, but who knows? Michael says, pleased to speak at the United Nations Summit of the Future Interactive Dialogue. Yesterday, we adopted the Pact for the Future, the most wide-ranging international agreement in years. Now our task as world leaders is to implement it as we build more sustainable and peaceful global order. So there were rules around the WHO. They had to post things. People talked about it. There was opposition, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody found out about this Summit of the Future as it was happening, or like the day before it was happening, and then we found out after it passed that it passed. Justin Trudeau didn't mention anything about doing anything at the UN as far as I saw before he left, but the reason he's there was to sign the Pact for the Future thing, right? And so he's doing these speeches, he's there for the United Nations, and they didn't have the checks and balances to give these emergency powers to the United Nations General Assembly had. So they could just do it in a weekend, bingo, bango, bongo, right? We'll have a quick little secret vote. Trudeau will do Colbert, and nobody will be the wiser, right? And people will be wondering why the policies have changed, because these guys agreed in a back room somewhere to change the policies, right? And Mr. Sunshine Baby highlights this. Colbert takes shots at Pierre Poilievre by calling him Canada's Trump. Justin Trudeau just used a foreign platform to take aim at the leader of the opposition. Isn't this election interference? And I can't stand Colbert. Like, he used to be funny. Honestly, he was my favorite. He was the period of time, there was a writer's strike in like 2008 or 2009 or something like that. And Colbert, Jon Stewart, and Conan all kept doing their shows. And I didn't really watch Conan because it was too late for me. But I watched Colbert pretty regularly, and I stopped watching The Daily Show because of that time period, because Jon Stewart, he was okay, but he wasn't great. And Colbert was great. Like, I think Colbert was actually even better when he was just by himself with no writers than when he had writer support, because the writers' jokes sometimes didn't always hit, right? I mean, maybe he's fine with the writers. I mean, look what's happened to him now with writers. Terrible, right? Absolutely terrible. But he was funny. And now he's just this shell of a shill. It's just awful to see. It's just terrible. And I mean, Justin Trudeau is terrible. Who wants to watch him? But yeah, having a foreign talk show host while Justin Trudeau's selling out the country to the United Nations future agenda or whatever it is, having the foreign talk show host take pot shots at your election opponent? I don't know, man. And then Justin Trudeau here, they do a back and forth where Justin Trudeau says, well, if only America had universal health care, and then the audience goes crazy. The reason they go crazy is because they don't understand that comes with wait lists, right? Like, that comes with, you don't get your doctor. You don't walk in and just have a doctor and whatever, and, walk in and get health care. You have to have a doctor in order to get more complicated care. Like, if you have a hernia is maybe a bad example, but like if you need an operation or something like that, you need to have a family doctor refer you to the specialist, and that referral can take months. And then the specialist refers you to the surgeon, and that referral can take months or years. And then the surgeon takes you on, if you're lucky, if the hospital has enough OR rooms. And again, you're talking from the beginning of like, oh man, I have this thing that I need to deal with, to operation. I've heard of people taking 3 years. There was a guy who was like 3.5 years. My wife had this thing that she needed an operation on 3 years ago, and 3.5 years later, here we are, and she's going into surgery today. And I read that on X like 2 days ago, and I thought, holy smoke, man! Like, that's wild. I hope the surgery went well. I think I even posted that. I hope her surgery goes well, because jeepers creepers, to wait that long and then to regret it after that'd be terrible. So I digress. Justin Trudeau going on to Colbert to, one, talk about policy in the US while also having Colbert take pot shots at Poilievre it's a weird situation. But he was only there in order to sign that agreement and to sell Canada out, probably. Ish. Who knows? I'm just speculating. Graham says, imagine a sitting U.S. president coming to Canada during a federal election and advocating for any particular kind of domestic Canadian policy initiative whatsoever. People would be outraged, screaming, foreign interference. Prime Minister Trudeau just doesn't get it. Major diplomatic faux pas. So I'll just play the healthcare kind of exchange here.
We'll keep working on that.
But we come up to you guys to get cheaper drugs.
Yeah,
we come over the border for cheaper drugs. You guys okay with that?
We're happy to try and help you out, but it'd be really easier if you guys had universal health care.
There you go. Right. So I think that's probably not the right move, because Canada shouldn't be advertising something that when people don't get the full story, because the full story is not what it seems, right? The more you need healthcare, the more universal healthcare is maybe not the right avenue. And I've heard stories as well of people going to the United States to get treatment. We had people who needed organ transplants who were on the wait list, who got removed from the wait list because they don't have the COVID vaccine, and they died. Like, it was a man in his late 30s, early 40s, like that's my age, and he died. And he could have lived if they had been humane and given him an organ replacement. And that's incredible. Like, free healthcare, you want that? Cheer away, you crazy people who don't understand what you're cheering for, right? Like, my goodness. So yeah, the Summit of the Future is why they were all there, and these people are excited about passing it. And he says, yesterday we adopted the Pact for the Future, the most wide-ranging international agreement in years. Next, our task as world leaders is to implement it as we build a more sustainable and peaceful global order. No thanks. I don't want their global order, because their global order is slavery for the rest of us. Dr. Tenpenny says, the United Nations Pact for the Future represents an unconstitutional effort to establish a treaty that undermines the sovereignty of the United States by allowing international organizations to declare a global state of emergency without our consent. This is detrimental not only to the United States, but also to the entire world. Listen, share, take action. This will prevent Florida from acting on its own. This will prevent other states from acting on its own. This will prevent Sweden from acting on its own. Next time they come out with this pandemic, and people believe it, because they need our buy-in in order to do any of it. Next time people believe their fear and scare tactics, then they won't have anybody stepping out of line, and they'll have legal tools to bring them back in line. And like, that's scary. Unless you're willing to fight a war and for your sovereignty, and a lot of people don't seem to be, then it's going to disappear. gov.exe.corrupt. And what I'm saying is, in the context of these agreements being in place, and the UN says, blah, 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 you have to do this, and you say no, it's like Poland or Hungary saying no to the migrants to the EU. Now they have fines that they're putting onto Hungary and Poland and so on and so forth. There's legal avenues for the EU to attack the country that's not doing what they want. Same thing with all of this, right? So Sweden, if they step out of line, these guys say, oh, you're going to be fined, millions of dollars for our health, comrade. And then they'll say, okay, well, we didn't know that was going to happen, and we didn't want that, so we'll just do the mask thing just to please these guys. Seriously, that's what's going on. So, right, that's why they have to silence me. Gov.exe says, last week, Justin Trudeau said he wasn't focused on politics after accusing everyone else of playing political games. Then has done nothing but play politics since. Here he is at the United Nations General Assembly playing politics to an almost empty room. It's a minute 39, and I desperately don't want to listen to Justin Trudeau at all. So link is in the description if you're interested in that. Kirk says, no one cares what Justin Trudeau has to say. Yeah, not even the United Nations, where he gave his globalist ideologies-filled speech to an empty room with a few staffers. So you can see all the empty chairs on the bottom. There's some staffers there to represent some people who, wanted to fill the seats, but really, nobody showed up for Justin Trudeau's speech. Nobody cares what Justin Trudeau has to say. Not even, I would bet Colbert's audience was low the other night. Stacy says, well, this isn't good, and why isn't the mainstream media reporting on it? This should actually kind of be in the government section, but it's important, and I feel like this kind of ties into CTV lying. This is a lie by omission. This is, we're not going to report on this, and if we don't report on it, then it didn't happen, essentially, right? Stacy is highlighting this. Nanaimo News Now. Police make substantial drug and weapons bust connected to Nanaimo overdose prevention site. Police raid a heavily used harm reduction site in Nanaimo resulted in several criminal charges against two people, and then they name the people. They were arrested in connection with a pair of drug busts locally on Thursday, September 12th, including the overdose prevention site located on Albert and Dunsmuir Street, operated by the Canadian Mental Health Association. So they were operating their drug den out of the CMHC building. Cool. They didn't even have to pay rent. The government was paying rent for them. Yay, right? Like, it's like Breaking Bad, and Walt has figured out a way to get the government to fund his operation. And, you know, everybody's just cool with it because the paperwork's all above board. It's insane, but that's what we're doing, right? There was a episode in Breaking Bad where they're stealing all of the chemicals out of a train, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's kind of like that, you know, like if you have the opportunity to do that and like set yourself up for a real long time, because that was the premise of the whole thing, like we never need this chemical again. Then you take a risk, you set it up, and you're like, I don't know if it's going to go through, but if it goes through, man, we're set, right? And these guys were set. And now the police are realizing that this is a bad idea, but here we are, right? Let's talk about the election, an upcoming election, because probably at some point soon, in the next 6 months to a year. CTV News, who could trust them, says House Speaker asks MPs to behave better in question period after incident, right? Like, what could the incident be? Like, what incident? Was there a report about an incident? Like, usually there's an incident, like incident happens in the House of Commons. Jagmeet Singh loses his mind, nearly gets into fight with leader of the opposition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You'd have a very descriptive headline if the media was honest, and the media is just not honest, right? Like, the media is trying to mislead you. But I think this is the only article about the incident, right? It's a post hoc article about, that incident. You don't even know. Oh, don't even worry about it, right? It doesn't even get mentioned what the incident was until later in the article. House of Commons Speaker Greg Fergus gave MPs a stern warning on Monday about improving their behavior as they prepare for a fractious debate about whether Liberals should continue to govern. The Conservatives Tuesday will formally introduce a promised motion asking the House of Commons to declare it has no confidence in the Liberals, in the Liberal government, or Prime Minister Trudeau. Last week, the NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and his caucus would not support the motion, led to a heated exchange in the House of Commons that one MP thought might actually come to physical blows. There were words which fall outside of what's acceptable, Fergus said before question period Monday. There was behavior which was also outside of the parliamentary traditions. He was referring to an incident last Thursday when Singh stepped out from behind his desk to shout at the Conservative leader after Pierre Poilievre called Singh a phony and a fraud for his refusal to vote to bring down the Liberal government. In a statement, the Conservative said Singh simply couldn't control his emotions and became erratic and challenged Poilievre to a fight during the exchange. Now that's an incident. Like, that's the lead right there. That's the headline. Jagmeet Singh and Poilievre nearly come to fisticuffs in the House of Commons, right? Hot-headed Jagmeet Singh can't control emotions or something like that, right? I'm sure there are other fun headlines that you could use. The Sun would have some great ones, right? Like, come on, there's so many things you could do. And everybody's just after incident. Yeah, give me a break. Shouting from all sides made it difficult to hear, and also the mute button being employed by Fergus in the House. What Poilievre and Singh were saying inside the chamber, and the audio feed that can help amplify a speaker was cut shortly after the exchange began. Wah wah. NDP House Leader Peter Julian said Singh was merely standing up to bullying from the Tory leader. I don't think threatening somebody to fight is standing up to bullying. What Mr. Poilievre was doing was absolutely unacceptable. I've never seen it happen in 20 years that any member of parliament has been allowed to spew insults, unparliamentary and disrespectful, without having his microphone cut off, Julian said in an interview last week. He asked the speaker to demand that Poilievre withdraw his comments and apologize. Fergus says he hopes to have more to say later in the week in light of several demands from MPs for more discipline in the House. I, for the first time ever sitting in the House, thought if they get near to each other, they're going to start hitting each other, said Green leader Elizabeth May, who sits directly across the aisle from Jagmeet Singh in the House. It was uncomfortably close to that, I thought. Yeah, I think that they're trying to undermine our entire system. And if you have people come to blows in the House of Commons, I mean, I've seen that happen in other House of Commons, right? Like the Irish House of Commons, I think we saw people, and I showed the video of it not long ago. There were whole big brawls in some Middle Eastern places where they're governed. I don't know if it's called legislature. I don't know what it's called. So but I saw a big brawl there. These things happen, not usually in Canadian politics. Has there been a fight on the Senate floor in the U.S. politics, House of Representatives, whatever? I don't think there's been a fight in Canada's House of Commons. Justin Trudeau elbowed a female MP in the boob once, and it was a pretty hard elbowing, right? So I don't know. That doesn't quite count as a fight, though. Bruce McGonigal says, moving on, the Liberal-appointed Speaker of the House is working very hard to help cover up who the treasonous MPs are. He claims that having 11 traitors in the House of Commons is not so serious that we need to have an open discussion about it. He's claiming treason is not a core threat to our democracy on the very day the government is trying to ram through the second reading of the pre-crime censorship bill C-63. Yeah, they're going to, I mean, like, I don't think the C-63 is going to stand up, but like, they've got the Senate, they've got the courts. We'll see. But like, it's going to be a nightmare no matter what way it falls. Here's Fergus.
While I understand that findings presented in the NCCOP report are serious and appear to create suspicions about certain members, that in itself is not a basis to establish this question of privilege, that this question of privilege merits priority of consideration over all other House business. Furthermore, the Chair notes that the NCCOP report was made public in the interest of not only public disclosure, but also to assist members of Parliament in their understanding of the threat foreign political interference poses to our democratic institutions. For these reasons, I cannot conclude that either the necessary conditions have been met to establish a prima facie question of privilege on the matter raised by the member. I thank all members for their attention.
So Fergus just said, Chinese interference? Nothing to see here. Next question. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful